So first of all, a huge thank you to Mark for inviting me to be here this evening. It's not the first time that I've spoken. After dinner at Green College, unfortunately, I'm of such an advanced age, I can't even remember what the occasion for the first time was. I was a little bit worried that my remarks might be too edgy, but you know, our comedian put me completely at rest. And I will say, I suffer from low self-esteem as well, but it's not about being attractive to women. So the first thing I want to talk a little bit about is that, you know, it was not always as cool to be interdisciplinary as it is today. 50 years ago, a bit before I turned 12, I was having a conversation with a colleague of my father's who, my father was very proud of his son. That was me. I was the second of 4 daughters, and they were only expecting to have 2 kids. And so I came along and I loved everything boy-like and hated, I mean, I still really don't like wearing dresses or jewelry or stuff like that. So anyhow, he was introducing this colleague very proudly to his son, who was quite gifted, he thought, my father thought, in both science, math, and art. And I was having a conversation with this colleague, and the colleague was asking me what I wanted to do with my life. And I said, well, I want to be an artist and a scientist and a mathematician. And the colleague said, that's not possible. You have to choose something to specialize in. And I said, but I'm going to be the next Leonardo da Vinci. Now, some 40 years ago, I started painting watercolors. And I was a graduate student in mathematics at the time. And I had continued, I mean, I have always painted. It's been something I've done my entire life. But I started working on watercolors. I have to tell you, my first year, they looked like mud. Not the mud that I'm currently at, but you know, the stuff that is dirt mixed with water. And then when I finished my PhD, I quickly hid the fact that I was a painter. And the reason was, it was already weird enough being a female mathematician and then later, 2 years later, a female computer scientist. Being an artist was just too flaky. And so I kept it hidden. In fact, absolutely nobody knew about it except for, you know, my very close family, my husband, my kids, and my sisters, my parents. And the year I turned 40, I was at UBC. I was head of the computer science department, and I decided I would come out of the closet. So I framed 13 paintings. I put 6 in my CS head's office, and I put 7 in my house. And I remember, you know, sort of people, actually there was somebody else who knew about this, David Kirkpatrick, who was my closest friend in the computer science department, and who actually was the person who really recruited me to UBC in the first place. But people came into my office and they were sort of like, really? I had no idea. And you know, within the first year, one of my paintings was stolen from my office. And I thought that was an enormous compliment. I have no idea who has that painting, but I will say that when I put up my first set of paintings at Harvey, my college, within 3 weeks, one of them was stolen. 15 years ago, a student who was, a graduate student who was at Green College came to talk to me, her name was Klawe, about asking me to serve on her interdisciplinary PhD program committee. And she came early because she had heard that I was an artist. And Kate was a very serious artist. She had had shows all over the place. And she came early so she could look at my work. She was the very first, quote unquote, real artist who talked to me about how great my work was. And I cannot tell you how much it meant for me, because for up until then, all of the quote unquote real artists I had met said, oh, you're not a real artist. I mean, you know, you didn't follow the path of an artist. You took the easy road out and, you know, you became a mathematician. You obviously didn't know about women in mathematics. And, you know, Kate was the person who commissioned me, actually got the commission from Green College, to do the portrait of Cecil and Ida Green that hangs here. And I cannot tell you how much Kate's affirmation of my painting meant to me. 10 years ago, I left UBC, and I will tell you, I cried every single day for 6 months after I made the decision to leave. I loved this institution. You have no idea how much I love this institution. But I had decided that I really wanted to change the culture of science and engineering, and after 14 and a half years at UBC, I became convinced that you cannot change the culture in science and engineering from Canada. I would go and talk about all the wonderful things UBC had done about partner hiring policies, making it possible to hire a pair of people who are incredibly gifted as faculty members here. And when I would talk to, say, all the department chairs of the top math departments in the US about this, they'd say, of course you can do that in Canada. It's a kindler country. You could never do that in the US. And it made me realize that if I was going to have the kind of impact I wanted to have in my life, I needed to move to the US. And so I accepted the job as Dean of Engineering at Princeton. And, you know, going there changed my painting, because Princeton really believes in well-rounded people. And the president, Shirley Tillman, another transplanted Canadian, she just embraced my painting. She hung my paintings in her office, in her home. Every single time she introduced me, she would say, here's our Dean of Engineering. She's a mathematician and computer scientist and a very gifted artist. And it's extraordinary how having other people validate what you're doing makes you reach further. And so while I was at Princeton, I started my first work on really trying to combine my love for mathematics with my love for painting. And I started doing paintings about pattern. Now, mathematics is all about pattern. And I started really thinking hard about the kind of pattern that I wanted to recognize from nature. Now, last summer, my daughter, who turned 28 recently and is in her first year at Harvard Law School and loving it, but does not want to be a lawyer, she says to me, Mom, you think what you do is important. You think encouraging women and minorities to go into science and engineering is important. It's not. I'm going to do something really important. I'm going to work on addressing poverty, healthcare, literacy, education in the developing world. Women in science and engineering, solving the problems of the developing world. She's absolutely right. I'm incredibly proud of her. But she says to me, last summer, she says, Mom, my best friend Colleen, she and Ben, her husband, who's an economist, and Colleen works for Boston Consulting Group, so they have tons of money. She says, Mom, Colleen went and she bought this antique map of the world, and it's so gorgeous and I can't afford one. Why won't you paint me one? I go, Sasha, that is ridiculous. I'd have to trace it. I mean, it would take me forever because everyone knows what continents look like. And yeah. She goes, oh, Mom. Okay, so I did it. It took me forever. She wanted the seas to be swirling dark purple and blue and the countries to be pale blue and purple. I did it. It took me, I cannot tell you how many hours. Okay, I finally finished it last summer over on our cottage on Pender, which is the best place in the universe if you haven't been to Pender Island. And my son, who's about to turn 31, comes to visit. And he goes, oh, Mom, I had no idea you could paint something so scientific and beautiful. You have to do one for me. I'm going, no way, never. It was the most ridiculous painting I've ever done. He goes, so you love Sasha more than you love me? Okay, so I ended up painting a topographical map of part of BC for him for Christmas. It took me 3 times as long as the painting for Sasha. He says, so you love me 3 times as much, right? And I was totally hooked. So now I'm on my 5th I call them mapscapes. The next one was the Yukon Delta. It looks like a cross-section of the human brain. I'm busy doing one about, just about finished one of the Ganges Delta, and I'm working on one of the Godley River in New Zealand flowing into Lake Tekapo, and I'm hooked. And the fact that it is this patterning in geographical formations, and did I mention my father was a cartographer? And I didn't even think about that for my first 3 paintings. It was my sister that pointed this out. So I finally found a way to really bring together my love for pattern in mathematics and my love for pattern in painting. Now, let me just talk very briefly about why interdisciplinary work is so important. The first thing, as it turns out I have been saying for about 20 years, is every single issue in the world, every important problem to solve, needs an interdisciplinary approach. None of the easy problems might need that, but all of the really hard ones do. So the second reason is, when you hear somebody else's perspective, the cultural framework and value system that they're using to look at something, and it's different from yours, it deepens your understanding. And the third reason is, if you think of every single conflict facing the world today, it's all about not being able to bridge those cultural differences. It's all about not having the experience of learning about other disciplines that frame things differently. So it's hard for me to think about much that's more important for the students we educate than giving them that experience. And of course, that's exactly what happens at Queen College. And I will say it is exactly what happens at Harvey Mudd College. We're the only science and engineering institution that requires our students to take 1/3 of their credits in humanities, social sciences, and the arts. And we do it because we were founded by one of the very few leading physicists in the United States who refused to work on the Manhattan Project because he thought it would be bad for the world. And he wanted to educate generations of engineers, scientists, and mathematicians who would think about the impact of their work on society. Yes, thank you. Joe Platt, our founding president, died just before his 97th birthday last August, and I can say I'm really blessed that I had my first 6 years as president at Mudd with Joe there to provide encouragement and guidance. He was truly extraordinary. So let me talk just very briefly before I finish about the challenges of doing interdisciplinary work. I started my first really big interdisciplinary project while I was at UBC in 1992, looking at whether it was possible to develop computer games that would be effective in increasing interest and achievement in mathematics learning in children aged 8 to 12. And of course, it was very important to me, given my particular biases, that whatever activities we actually designed be as attractive to girls as they would be to boys. This ended up being a 10-year project. It involved mathematics educators, computer scientists, game developers, a leading children's novelist, musicians, lots of different people. And about 3 months into the project at the beginning, I suddenly realized that every single person working the project was unhappy. And, really unhappy. I mean, unhappy enough to quit the project. And so I went and talked to each one of them, one at a time. And what I found out was that every single person thought they were contributing the greatest amount to the project, and nobody else was recognizing what they were contributing. And so of course they felt undervalued, because there they were doing the lion's share of the work, and nobody was recognizing it. Well, you all have enough experience with interdisciplinary learning and scholarship to know that each one of them within their own disciplinary perspective was doing the most important part of the work. And they were all doing different things. And they all couldn't figure out why everybody else wasn't saying, thank you for doing the most important part of the work. And so we had a team meeting and we talked about the values in education, the values in computer science, the values in game development, the values in data analysis. And all of a sudden everyone realized everybody was contributing. Everybody was contributing the bit that they could bring to it, and nobody had understood the other bits and how they all fit together. And that project went on for 10 years. It was one of the great experiences of my life. It was one of my best learning experiences about how values differ across disciplines. So making interdisciplinary projects work, unless you're in a nurturing environment like this one, can be really challenging. The second thing that often happens when you work between more than one discipline is neither discipline, or if there are several of them, think you're really doing good work. And this happened to me when, shortly after I got my PhD in mathematics and then discovered that there were really no jobs that I wanted that I could get in as a mathematics faculty member, and started a second PhD in computer science 1 year after I finished my PhD in mathematics at the University of Toronto. And then, the job market was so nuts in computer science, just like it is today, that the University of Toronto hired me. I would say that UBC is actually one of the leading institutions in valuing interdisciplinary work, and I think a large part of that is due to Green College. So let me just close by saying why Green College is so important, not for its last 20 years, but for its next 20 years. And yes, the last 20 years have been glorious. Green College was really the seed, or one of the seeds, for interdisciplinary scholarship and learning. And it particularly nurtured graduate students, but it also brought together, and many of the faculty, it's lovely to see many of the faculty whom I haven't seen for decades since leaving for Princeton, but it's just lovely to see you again. And oh my God, Peter Sugfeld, I cannot believe you. You look exactly the same as when I first arrived at UBC 25 years ago. I don't know how he does it. He has some mirror or something. But yes, it is a joy to be here. Green College was not just a seed for interdisciplinary discourse, learning, scholarship. It was also a seed for a residential community for graduate students. And I'm fortunate in having had one of my master's students live at Green College while he was here, and Kate Klawe, a PhD student, live at Green College. And one of the things I really understood from them was they were getting a sense of community, a sense of adventure, a sense of intellectual delight and exploration, and yes, outright craziness from being part of this community. That's really special. And what needs to happen, Hugh, I'm looking at you. I didn't know you were a folk musician, and all these things come out. What really needs to happen over the next 20 years is that Green College, or what Green College stands for, infects the rest of the institution. And I know it already has done a lot of that in the last 20 years. I know that, there's a lot more residential opportunities for graduate students. It's amazing for me to come back and see all these people living on this campus, which I love. I know it was David Strangway's vision. It's lovely to see it coming to fruition in such a positive way. But it also needs to be the glue that helps especially given how things have evolved with the Faculty of Graduate Studies and the fact that many of our interdisciplinary centers have now migrated into the faculties. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I'm saying you still need glue. You need magnets that bring together the different parts of the university in unusual and inspirational ways. And that, I believe, is what Green College can do. And for every single one of you who's here tonight, but particularly for our residents, you are taking a unique experience. And wherever you go after you are here, you will take the knowledge of just how wonderful it is to read poetry, to have a crazy comedian, and then, oh my God, such great music. And have that be part of your daily experience. To understand about the range of intellectual inquiry, crazy creative expression, and everything else in between. How vibrant that makes a scholarly life. And so when you leave UBC, as many of you will, you can take that magic, that experience you had, and you can take it out and you can fuel energy and inspiration and interdisciplinary approaches across the world. So thank you for having me here tonight. It is a joy always to be back at UBC. It's particularly a joy to see so many people who I truly love, adore, miss on a regular basis. And I also just want to say thank you. UBC, to a very large extent, made me who I am. The city of Vancouver made me who I am. Many people in this room made me who I am. And I just feel incredibly lucky to have had this opportunity in my life. Thank you.